surgical tweaks or structural shifts, decoding political realities and regulatory reforms.
Come on board. First of all, thank you very much for joining us for the last panel. We appreciate it. I'm very lucky here today to be surrounded by very esteemed colleagues of mine. Makes my job extremely easy, especially when tackling such a difficult question as what does the regulator, the government, and the industry do to solve the current issues at play. We're currently going to unpack from the point of view of different jurisdictions what each jurisdiction that our experts currently find themselves knowledgeable in could do to improve the regulatory situation. So if each member could take a moment to introduce themselves very quickly, just a name, what they do, and how long they've been in the industry, we can crack on. Rich?
My name is Richard Dennis. I'm the CEO of Game Lounge. We run 60 affiliate sites all the way around the world. Pretty successful. And I've been in the industry for 1.5 years, so very new. And therefore, I think that gives me a pretty fresh opinion on what I see since I've been here.
Perfect. Thank you. Paul?
My name's Paul Fox. I've been in the industry my entire life. I come from a family of bookies. I'm based in the Philippines, and my company, Claymore Solutions, we provide outsourcing services to internationally licensed gambling companies that want to take advantage of the Philippine labor market.
Hi, I'm Heathcliff Farrugia. I'm the COO at Sigma, and also responsible for international and government relations. I've been in the industry for 11 years now. I've spent 7 years at the regulator at the MJ as well. That's about it.
Yeah, my name is Dimitry Voelkle. I'm the CEO from Zelda Consulting. I'm now around about 24 years in the business, mainly on the German market, but also on the Canadian ones. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. So I myself, I'm the CEO of an online B2C company targeting the UK called L&L Europe. Next to Dimi, I'm a baby. I've been in it for 10 years. So Dimi, if you could you please tell us what's going on in Germany? You have some pretty restrictive conditions going on over there. Can you please walk us through them?
Yeah, in Germany, a lot is going on. It's a lot going on since the last 2 decades already. So, but when I'm looking a bit closer, especially in the iGaming market, with all the restrictions we have with the GGL, there are some 3 big points. I was said so. I think everybody knows that already. So we have a maximum stake in slots for €1. We have don't start laughing. That's unfortunate. It is true. And then we have a 5-second spin. And the other one is, and I think that's a huge impact. You're only allowed to place bets on the sports betting side combined with slots for €1,000 a month. For sure, you can get higher to 10 and much more, but then your players have to send over bank accounts and all that stuff. But a standard one is for €1,000 a month. So believe me, you know exactly when we are talking about. When you think the traffic is coming on your servers exactly in the first day of the new month, because you have 2 or 3 days, and then the €1,000 are normally gone. So that's the biggest impact. But there are a few thousand other impacts. So if you have time later on, I can talk about all the impacts we have in Germany. Yeah.
Perfect. Paul, what's happening in the Philippines?
A lot. At the start of the year, the Philippines banned the POGOs. The POGOs were the big Asian-facing operators. That was the gaming license in the Philippines. They were primarily targeting mainland China. These were all the companies you saw in Premier League jerseys. And the Philippines decided that there had been too much criminality in the country as a knock-on effect of this. So they outlawed them entirely. And then from there, a couple of years ago, the Philippines introduced PIGOs, which are for the domestic market, and they were very nearly banned just last week, but they've survived by the skin of their teeth. But regulators are now clamping down on what they can do even more. So there's been a lot of change in the Philippines recently. And now the focus is more on providing outsourcing for companies that are based abroad so that they're not targeting Filipinos, and there's no bets being struck in the Philippines because the biggest industry in the Philippines is outsourcing call centers. So that's where the focus is now, and that's what I'm focused on.
Very interesting. Very different to what we're used to here based in Europe. And on that topic, Heathcliff, you're the ex-CEO of the MGA. Do you think that the regulators are out of control? Do you think the government is out of control introducing all this legislation? Are we over-legislating?
Well, out of control for a regulator, it's quite a statement. But what I think is that ultimately there is a lot of regulation across the EU. However, regulation is important. I would say regulation is vital for the industry. The industry cannot operate in a proper way without regulation. But that doesn't mean that we should see what's happening in the, let's speak about the EU. I mean, the problem I see with the EU is that regulators are doing their job. So even though we see these sometimes millions of euros in fines to licensed operators, honestly, I wouldn't take it against the regulators. They are doing their job. They have the regulations, they have the laws which were introduced by their respective politicians, and they are simply actioning what they were meant to do. Regulators do that. Regulators need to make sure that those who are in possession of a license are duly worthy of holding that license. The problem I see is for the non-regulated, because ultimately we are in a situation, not just in the EU, but mainly in the EU, in Europe. The situation we have is that it doesn't pay for you to be regulated, unfortunately, because if you are properly regulated, if you are paying the taxes, if you are paying all those compliance costs, you get sort of constantly monitored. And then again, it's what regulators should do. You are constantly monitored by regulators. You are getting fines. Then we can argue and disagree on whether or not the amounts of fines, it could be they are sometimes exaggerated. Yes, we can argue about that. However, the problem I see is that regulators, and these are the powers at law they have, regulators can only take action against their licensed operators. So a regulator can never target the illegal because they do not have the powers at law to stop the illegal. The regulators can only take action on the operators who have a license with them. So the problem I see is that we have all these regulators full of very valid individuals. They are doing their job, yes, fine. But who is doing exactly the same on the illegal ones? I would say nobody, or it's not clear. Because technically it should be the police. Sometimes it should be the financial police. But it's not clear. And then what the problem we have is that the police, I mean, they have an endless amount of priorities. So for them to target the illegal gambling in the same way regulators are monitoring the legal operators, those who are licensed, then I'm seeing a huge split. And that is the problem we have today. I wouldn't target the regulators because the regulators are doing their job, but who is doing exactly the same on the legal? The answer is very clear. Little is being done. And that is why the more regulations we have for all the licensed operators, the more there will be scope for the legal, for the black market. I mean, nowadays we are in 2025. I've been in the industry 11 years. We've been discussing illegal gambling, or sometimes we call it gray, or different shades of gray or black. But we've been discussing this, I don't know, we've been discussing this for years. Fast forward 11 years, at least that's how long I've been in the industry, we are still discussing the same problems. So with all these regulations, the endless regulations, I remember when we had one license which was sort of user allowed to be used across all EU, many were saying that the only way to stop illegal gambling is by introducing the state-by-state regulation. Now I ask myself, and I can ask even the others, do you think that with the state-by-state regulation we did manage to stop the illegal gambling? I think the answer is no, but not because the regulations do not make sense. We can discuss that, we can argue that. The problem I see, and I repeat it again, is that nobody's taking exactly the same, obviously, action as the regulators, but on the legal. There is nobody who's responsible for that action.
So, you say so many interesting things over there, which are very difficult to unpack. But the one major thing which we're agreeing here is that the regulators' overall aim is not only to monitor the licensees, but it's in order to create a framework which is assisting people who are operating in the regulated market to conduct their operations fairly and with good conscience, with ethics, player protection, and ensuring that it is done in a proper way. So why is it so difficult to have that joined approach at an EU level, that each country agrees that we need to have a harmonized approach to be able to tackle this problem? Maybe you have some insights there, having dealt with it for
Well,
sure.
if we start talking about harmonization, I think we'll need to add a couple more hours to that time there. But ultimately, harmonization is an interesting topic. If you asked me this question 2 years ago, my answer would have been very clear that yes, we need harmonization. Nowadays, I say yes, but, because the scary part of harmonization, at least across the EU, is that when there is harmonization, usually, at least from what we're seeing, is that the strictest model of regulation then becomes the rule. So if, let's say, you correctly spoke about the German regulations, what if all of a sudden the German model of regulation becomes the norm across the EU? What if the same things which my colleague here doesn't agree with in Germany become the norm? So yes, harmonization can help, but it needs to be very well thought out. I think one of the reasons why these state-by-state regulations were created was in reality the tax. I mean, let's be honest. Everyone wanted to have the fair share of tax, and I'm being very honest, I think it's fair as well. Tax on point of consumption is considered fair as well. If you have your players are based in Germany, then it's fair that tax is paid in Germany. Let's not get into that. But now that that is solved, now that each and every EU jurisdiction, or pretty much each and everyone, has its own fair share of tax, why don't we start discussing harmonization? Why should a player who is based in Germany be protected differently than a player being based in Malta or in France? Aren't we all European citizens? Why should players be protected differently? I think we will get there one day or another, but we're still far away, in my opinion.
Dimi, any thoughts from the German perspective?
You already said nearly everything I want to say for it. Yeah, for sure. But hopefully, the rest of Europe is not following the German way, because it's really tough. It's really, really tough to follow up all the rules and all that stuff from Germany. But as you said, I think we should, especially in Europe, we should work much more together, that the countries are sitting together and finding a way where every country will have the same regulatory stuff, because it's a hassle when I'm talking with all of my clients. Some of them, we're in the Netherlands, we're in Sweden, we have another department there, we need someone else there, because the regulations are so different. I think the customers could save a lot of money, the operators could save a lot of money when we just harmonize it across Europe. And also the other thing, which I think it's really, really important, that the government, the organizations are talking with the industry. When I'm looking sometimes at a GGL, they're light years behind the technology. So there's so many nice tools out there where we can offer on operator side really nice stuff, but till the regulators is deciding, yes, you're allowed to go with this, or yes, you're allowed to go with that. There are 2 years. After 2 years, then you have to produce another thing, and another thing. Just give me a fun fact on the side. Sorry when we are running out of time, but we are the last panel, so I'm allowed to speak a little bit more. Just a fun fact on the side. You're a game provider, right? And you're developing a game, a real nice one. You're sending it over to the GGL. The GGL takes around about half a year up to 2 years to get your game approved. And then said, okay, you're a nice game provider, you have this game approved. Exactly. First, the game is outdated, but then you have to send this game to your operator, and the operator have to go to the GGL and have to certify it again.
Game's
Don't
gone.
ask me.
So if you don't mind, mostly
I've got a
interesting
view, yeah.
is from the affiliate point of view.
So listen, the second biggest audience of our site, so we don't have a German site, is Germany. And the biggest query on Google for crypto casinos is in Germany. Okay, so the problem is that the regulators are trying to influence user behavior. They're trying to tell humans, grown-up humans, what to do with their money. And yes, from a point of view of giving good advice, fair enough. But in terms of regulations and forcing people to do things they don't want to do, it's never going to work. Simply because there's another alternative. There's an alternative on offshore unlicensed casinos. And also financially, there's an alternative in cryptocurrency. So I was sitting with a friend of mine the other day. We were in Greece. He opens his wallet. He goes on a game. He plays a game. He wins. He loses. No one knows. There's no regulation. It was on a game that was in Norway. He was in Greece. No one can see it. And that's by far bigger than the regulated market right now already. So we see this as an affiliate. We see it on all of our sites. In one market, we had an operator in the Netherlands when they introduced another payment limit, deposit limit. In 24 hours, the entire VIP book had gone to crypto. 24 hours. If you try and influence user behavior using regulation, you will lose the control and oversight and guidance and governance of large proportions of the population. And which proportion of which populations are affected first? It's the under 25s, because they're the most digitally mobile people. And they're the people that everybody's trying to protect, but the over-regulation is an overreach. And we see it every single day. Every single day we see in our regulated sites where we're carrying operators regulated, every day we have a call coming in saying, we'll pay 10 times what they're paying as a cryptocurrency or offshore operator. It's here, and the regulations are not working. I completely understand and support the regulations for casinos. There should be guidelines. There should be responsible behavior. But when you start bowing in and saying the taxes are high, and you're losing the competition. You're losing the competition in every minute of every day. And those players are just disappearing into the... And once they're in crypto, you'll never get them back. Never, ever, ever. So, this is our message, and we've been trying to say this for a long time. In the end of the day, an affiliate, we can choose whether we want to be in a legal or illegal world. We have that choice. And as Game Lounge, we are very careful that we stay on the right side of the line. But it's incredibly tempting, financially, to move across into the dark side every single day.
Do you think it's a matter of time before the regulated world and the affiliate world hits, and affiliates will start having to become regulated as well in many of these top jurisdictions?
Because there will always be an unregulated, unlicensed affiliate in an offshore position. I mean, the chap from Malta University earlier saying the industry is opaque, and therefore the dark side lurks in the shadows.
Yeah.
And our competitors are there. They're doing all sorts of crazy things. We can see it every single day.
Yeah.
You'll never, ever license those people, ever. So it's a nice dream, but the reality is pretty hard.
Understood. If I could just ask from each one of you what your solution, your suggestion to the problem could be, at least one small minor improvement. I started from Richard.
Yeah, I would basically trust the tools around responsible gambling. There's some very, very good tools out there in the marketplace. You've got Bet Blocker, and you've got all the RG stuff that's designed particularly to moderate people's safety.
With Duncan?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think they're brilliant tools, and we should be all doing deals with them, and we should work hard with them. If you're overtaxing and the German regulations with, the 5-second spin, €1 and 1,000, I mean, nobody does that. So, yeah, I mean, it would just lift those. Regulate companies, not individuals.
Understood. Paul?
To go back to the previous point and also tie it into this, the one exception to everything everyone said is actually the biggest gambling market in the world, and that's China. And China's the one country that's actually been successful in tackling this. The Chinese online gambling has dropped off a cliff in the past few years. All the big Chinese-facing operators previously, Fund, DAFA, Mansion, all the big names, they've now had to pivot to India and Southeast Asia and whatnot. Online gambling pertaining to China, I won't say
in China, but outside China,
inside
a lot of companies in this room and everywhere else are benefiting from Chinese traffic that's not in China.
But what the way that they've had the success in China, and the reason that no other country can replicate what they've been able to do in China, is because the Chinese government control the entire ecosystem. There's no Facebook, there's no Google, there's nothing like that. Every tech company in China, the CCP have backdoor access to all of it. WeChat Pay, Alipay, QQ Play, so they're the ones
and the IDs, and they can
exactly.
So Paul's headline suggestion is introduce communism.
That's the only thing that works.
Understood.
Totalitarianism tomorrow, please.
Heathcliff?
So I think that very, very important is to have open communication with the operators. I think in our previous panel, there was someone who correctly stated that regulators and even in line with your comments, regulators are always following, are always sometimes 2 years behind, sometimes 3 years behind. So ultimately, regulators are at times trying to regulate what's happening in the past. Now, does it make sense to regulate something which is in the past? But in my opinion, regulators tend to go into too much detail. They try to regulate each and every small item, and it doesn't make sense. In line with what Richard said, you look at, we need to have guidelines rather than going into the detail. And one thing sometimes regulators, sometimes even governments fail to understand is that for players, it is less relevant, unfortunately. It is less relevant where the operator has the license from. A player, as long as a player goes on a website, they place a bet, they win and they get the money, that's what matters. As long as the money comes into account, they couldn't care less if they have a license from this jurisdiction, if they have zero license. Exactly. The last thing they stay checking is if they have a license. When do players check if they have a license? If something goes wrong. Yep. Then if something goes wrong, they start looking at the license. They start calling that regulator. But if an illegal operator has a proper setup and they always honor their wins, ultimately they will never have a situation where their players will stay looking at the license. And unfortunately, this is the sad reality we are in, and that is why regulations and regulators need to follow suit.
Thank you very much. Finally, Dimi.
Oh, yeah, finally I have a few minutes left, I think so. No, joking. So when I'm looking in the future, I'm a fan of regulation. I like regulation. I would call it, as a typical German, I said, build up a highway where the operators and the casinos can play, but please, and that's the most important thing, take care that everyone is inside the regulation. And to secure this, the regulator have to talk to the different industry, to compliance companies, to everyone. And that's, I think it's a very nice thing where we can close this conversation, look around this conference, we see all the different companies here in different parts of the industry. They should talk to them, then what can we do to secure our highway where we can run and offer the product, because everyone knows there is a need, otherwise they will not play, but on a regulated side. Go out, talk to them, sit together on a table and find a solution together. And for me, it would be fine if we can find a European-wide solution where everyone is happy with that. You know, I'm drawing now a nice picture. But then I know exactly that we are all fine, and we would be really happy to drive a fast, nice car on this highway.
Perfect. Thank you very much for today. I thank you for all joining us, and I hope you found this useful and helpful.